Shalom and welcome. We are
the Hebrew Sisters.
We're going to pick up again with our wonderful discussions about the festival
of Hanukkah.
Hanukkah is also known as
the Feast of Lights or the Feast of Dedication.
And so we're going to talk today about an exciting part. And each part that we've shared with you leads up to this story, the story of the Maccabean Revolt and that incredible family known as the Maccabees. The head of the family, the father, who was the priest, was named Judah Maccabee, and he had 5 sons. Well, Judah Maccabee and his best friend, who was another priest, lived in a village just outside of the area of Jerusalem. They lived in a village known as Moadim, and it was a beautiful little farming village. And again, Judah Maccabee, his 5 sons, who would also become priests, and Judah's best friend, who was a priest, lived there. Well, this was a really, really difficult time in the time frame of Israel. And the Syrian soldiers who now had killed Hannah and Eleazar and those sons and were determined to bring all of the priesthood, because the priests had such power with the people, not over, with the people in the land of Israel, that small group of Israelis that were holding out, saying we're not going to conform to that Greek way of life. Judah Maccabee was the biggest voice. Judah Maccabee helped them, he hid them, he gave them encouragement and love that they needed to be strong. Well, the Syrians kept ramping up the laws. If we catch you praying, if we catch you reading the Bible, if we kept you keeping any of God's ways, or using language to worship him or to even thank him, we will bring your family out to the public square, and in front of your eyes, we will slaughter them. And they did that over and over and over. And so what they would do is the Syrians, they would ride into a community. They'd choose a village each Shabbat, and they would ride into the center of the community, which they always had a center there with a well. And it was a place where everyone met in the evenings to talk and share life. Right. And so the Syrians rode in and called all of the village out. And the night before, Judah Maccabee found out about this. So he gathered his sons to him. He put them all around him on his breast and in between his legs, and hugged them and holding them. And he said, tomorrow, sons, our lives are going to change. So this is all I'm going to say to you. Do you trust me? Do you love me? All 5 of them answered, oh, yes, Father, we love you. And he said this, no matter what I do, follow me.
That's good.
And so the sons pledged that they would, and they went to sleep. The next day, here came a number of those Syrian Greek soldiers. They came in and they surrounded the village. And they brought, as they did, every time they did this, those Syrians, a pig, and created an altar and put the pig on the altar. They called Judah Maccabee and his best friend, the other priest, forward and said, sacrifice this pig to the god Antiochus Epiphanes. Well, Judah Maccabee had already decided that for he and his house, he would serve the Lord. His best friend, however, stepped forward to agree. At this moment, Judah Maccabee drew from inside of his cloak a dagger. He stuck his friend, killed his friend right there on the spot. And as he did that, the Syrian soldiers drew their swords, but the sons of Maccabee jumped the Syrian soldiers and killed all of them right there. Now, what a dramatic moment that was. So, and it's important to say, why did Judah Maccabee kill his best friend who was going to sacrifice that pig and pray to the Greek gods?
That's it. I believe you said it in another one of our previous videos is this, that had he went ahead and partaken of the pig and everything that ensued, he was setting a precedence for the rest of them, and to lower their standards, to let down. And here he is a priest. And so we have to understand that a lot of times decisions are made that will be difficult in making them. But in Judah Maccabee's mind, what he was doing was actually saving the life of his best friend by taking his life.
That's exactly right. Now, let me just say this. That's not for us to do today. We don't live by the sword today.
Right.
Because we live in New Testament days, or the days that Messiah, after he has come to earth and risen, he has given us a better way, a newer way to not speak against our enemies, but actually to love our enemies. Right. These days are no longer an eye for eye or tooth for tooth.
Very true.
These days it's about mercy and kindness, which triumphs over judgment.
That's good.
But in those days, Judah Maccabee knew he loved his friend, and he knew that they were going to kill his friend anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so he sent him to heaven with clean hands. Now, again, that's Tanakh days. That's BC days, before Messiah days. And it was actually a gift of love. Well, back to the story.
Yeah.
So now Judah Maccabee knows that to save the village, he has to leave. And this begins what is known as the Maccabean Revolt. And all over, the word spread quickly. If you want to take Israel back into our hands, if we want the worship of the one true God to be on the earth, if we want to pray, sing, worship, and keep his ways, then we must rise up. And from all over Israel, Israelis began to join this little army of Maccabees led by Judah, known as the Hammer Maccabee. And they would hide out in the forest and in the hills and in different places all over Israel. As the army grew in strength and grew in number, men, women, and children joined this army.
Sure did.
To make a stand for the one true God. The great news is this. In 3.5 years, Judah Maccabee, along with his valiant 5 sons, along with this little army of shepherds and agricultural people who long ago had forgotten the ways of war, they joined together, and everywhere they went, they were conquering the Greek army, the Syrian Greek army that was there. And every day they were moving closer and closer to Jerusalem until the final battle, when Judah Maccabee defeated all of the Syrian soldiers who had set up a stronghold around the temple in the city of Jerusalem. They snuck in, and through magnificent maneuvers that the Lord gave Judah Maccabee, they were able to rid Israel of every Syrian soldier. And so Israel came back into the hands of her people through the valiant stand of this one great man known as Judah the Hammer Maccabee. And today, even to this very day, Israel is Israel because of what this great man had done.
I absolutely love this story. And I also want to add, Yana, that when they went in and took back Jerusalem, they took back the temple. Now remember, Antiochus Epiphanes had been sacrificing pig on the altar.
The Holy of Holies.
Yes, exactly. And pouring the blood out over the altar.
The blood of
pigs in the most holy place over the Holy of Holies.
Who would do such a thing?
Right. And on the altar as well.
And he put up a emblem, a statue of his face on the Holy of Holies.
Right.
Who would dare to do such?
He was trying to, again, cause them to bow down and worship him. This is why we say that Antiochus Epiphanes is a pattern of what we would call the anti-Messiah that is talked about in the New Testament. So when they went in and they begin to cleanse everything in the temple.
Oh!
There is a story to tell about this, and we'll show this also in the New Testament on our next week's teaching. So make sure that you stay tuned, because we're going to pull this full circle next week and talk about the stones and what they did in that day with the stones of the altar that were desecrated by the pig's blood.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed this story time. You know, as ancient people, we love to convey the things of the Lord through story. So did the Messiah when he was here.
Yeah.
And we hope that this story is meaningful to you. It's not a made-up story. It's accurate history. And we believe that today it has message of hope and encouragement just for you. For now, we want to bless you, tell you how precious you are to the Lord, and remind you to stay tuned. We are the Hebrew Sisters. Shalom.